I was very interested to be invited to this forum at all, because working in the development sector, one doesn't usually get to attend investor forums. But I was glad I was, because, and to be asked to talk about export, because we've been working with the support of SDC funding, on a market systems development program for a very long time, for about 9 years, 8-9 years now. And the theory was that we would work in the livestock market system and build it up and look for systemic change within those systems. I mean, so primarily now we're looking at dairy. Dairy is the most established one, and meat. And wool has come along as a good sector with some potential, and also honey. Honey is the developing one. We've had some nice impact over the years. The way we work is we basically try and engage the private sector, and we work by what we call a co-investment. A lot of people would call a grant, but I see it as a form of investment because we are buying down the risk, basically, of these companies to operate. Because the companies that we work with, that we find are operating under, in a very, very risky environment, due to many of the things that we heard. So many things have to be built up to make sure those companies can survive and be competitive in the environment. But I'm glad to be able to show that in spite of these challenges, we've had the pleasure to see over the years, with the key agency of the NFA, National Food Agency in particular, a real improvement in standards and in the, these things we talked about. ISO, yes, but HACCP, good management practices, inspections. Now we're looking at, we've gone from basic milk hygiene and HACCP on factories to things like labelling. So now we're getting much, much more sophisticated in the things that we're looking at. We're looking at value-added branding, for example. The dairy sector is fascinating because we now have, yes, you can buy cheese made with milk powder. It's branded and packaged beautifully. It's in Carrefour. We've seen a massive expansion in supermarkets. But you also have as well milk sourced from small-scale producers. The money is going back into the community. It's being used by women to invest in their own businesses, in health, in welfare. And this milk is from pasture that is not sprayed. It's got beautiful, flora in it, and it's providing support to communities on a model which basically preserves the environment of Georgia as well. And when you have investors all in the next room looking at hospitality and tourism based on natural beauty, that's a good thing. These are some of the countries that, let's say, have flirted with export, but not just flirted. Some of these have become permanent channels. The problem is, you can have vet medicines going to the Ukraine, you can have wool going there, but then, there are border snafus, there are, customs problems, and then it closes, and there's the risk. There's the risk for the businesses, and therefore the investment. And that's why we have had to play the role we've had to play in investing in these businesses in a development model, i.e. we don't expect a financial return to us, we expect a social return for the farmer. Just to give you an example of the kind of things that are coming out, over time, and it's quite fascinating. The very first factory we really invested in using the model that we use, which was to find they don't have to be flashy or anything, as long as they had a good market, good supply and a good market. Didn't matter if it was Deserti market in Tbilisi. Was a company who said first thing they said was we want to export to the USA. And we said, okay, I think you need to concentrate on actually some just basic equipment first. But they're doing it, and they've just signed an agreement after they've already done 34 tons of cheese to Los Angeles and New York, and now they've just signed an agreement for doing $500,000 worth of cheese a year. So these are community-based enterprises. but they're processing 6 tons a day at the moment. They're selling to Carrefour, they're selling to, all the major supermarkets. They're supplying Majachilla. So these are decent sized enterprises, and there's a lot of them. Wool, you're starting at the bottom of the value chain. There's no fanciness here. This is greasy wool. This is the basic commodity. However, this is slowly growing, and we're seeing some diversification of the market, in that there's a crowding in the market now of players who are buying wool and sending it to the newly opened India market instead of just the Turkish one. The Indian market's a bit better because they have pre-signed agreements and it pays better than the Turkish market. So the risk is coming down, but the better ones are selling at the moment to the UK. So there are markets there. This thing along the bottom is how much money was put in over time, into this particular enterprise, which was the Georgian Wool Company. It's a business that required a fair amount of investment for not a lot of profit. Meat's profitable. It's really good. Things like the biosecurity network that's been put in place recently with dipping and control of ectoparasites for animals, and the free trade agreement with Iran in particular, have meant that we've seen the trade in sheep and processed sheep meat rather than live animal has it's exploded. I mean, frankly, we have to watch out that the sheep population doesn't get emptied out, because all the sheep of Georgia could easily feed Iran very quickly. But this is a good business, and what's a good thing about it, it's going from supplying live animals, which is always the poorer end of the spectrum, to providing processed carcass meat, which is going chilled, which is excellent. And this was just veterinary sector, just to see one of the input makers here. Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Armenia, they're forging partnerships. We also have a partner now who's working with Polish machinery coming into Georgia and selling it in Armenia. There are opportunities, but as was said, the risk environment is still rocky. And I think if you're going to invest in this, you have to be preferred, A, to go and find real people working in communities, and you'd have to come out of this Tbilisi circle. I'm not sure at this point how that connection would be made with one of these kind of entities and an investor. That's, I think, a question for us. And also to consider a social and environmental component, although these businesses are actually now showing a profit. Thank you very much.